Johnny, we're live. How you doing, man?
Good, Julian. Nice to see you again. Nice beard.
Yeah, thanks. I was trying to copy you after your Atlantic trip.
Yeah, I know. Mine's long gone, thank God.
Yeah, that was some epic beard growth, but I guess that was always gonna be on the cards, wasn't it?
Ginger and grey. It's a good look.
Oh man, the greys are coming through, and
No, mine was more white, mate. If you ever want to feel old, grow a beard.
The longer it gets, the whites come out, and it's kind of like a forced requirement of like getting rid of it.
Yeah, that's why I keep the sides of my hair short, keep them at bay.
So what's up? Where in the world are you? I think I can see a pretty tight hotel room in the background.
I'm in quarantine in Bangkok, 15 days, locked inside.
So where have you come from to be back in Thailand?
I flew via Bahrain, but I was in England for a few weeks sorting out my vaccinations before I came back.
Nice.
It's actually not that bad though. So in Thailand, it's state quarantine, the same thing that they have in England, and I think they have it in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Australia too, and Ireland. Where if you go to like a red list country, then you've got to pay for your own quarantine for like 5 days, 10 days, 15 days, whatever it is in the country.
Yeah.
And Thailand's the longest one. If you arrive at the wrong time, it's 16 days. I was 15 days.
And are you allowed out the room?
No.
Not at all.
No, but it's at your own expense, and obviously Thailand's a bit cheaper. So I've got I'm in an Ibis, which sounds a bit grim, but actually it's the Ibis near Khao San Road, and it's kind of snazzy. And I've got like a 2-bedroom place, and they've made one of the bedrooms into a gym with a treadmill and a weights thing and all. So actually, it's pretty cool.
And how did it work from like when you got off, like when you arrive in Thailand? Did they just escort you to the hotel or?
Yes. Yeah, but like no kidding. I got off the flight the other day. I was a bit drunk as well coming off the flight, and like about 30 people in hazmat suits meet you, completely covered from head to toe, and you get ushered in. It was pretty mad.
Yeah, I have to say I am going to Australia fairly soon in the next couple of months, and it's the least thing I'm excited about. In fact,
you got that paid quarantine there, right?
Yeah, you have to pay. I don't think they let you choose anything before. You just have to pay when you get there, and then you're the same thing. You're just forced into a room for 2 weeks. So
in Thailand, you can choose, and you can go from like the cheapest one is like £650, about $800, or you can pay like 15 grand and get like a pool villa and everything, but you're still locked inside it. So it's just up to you how much you want to spend, how nice it is.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, we could probably spend an hour talking about some of these ridiculous rules and regulations and stuff.
I'm enjoying it. I got my missus dropped my PlayStation over. I'm marathoning Handmaid's Tale, ready for the new season. I'm actually having a great time.
How far in are you?
I've seen it before the first 3 seasons, but I loved it so much. The 4th season just came out, so I'm watching it all again. And I'm in quarantine, so I've got time to do it.
Nice. And have you got like a routine then? Are you like doing exercise, or are you
yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a routine. I'm not sticking to it as much as I should be, but yes, I do have a routine. I've got a routine on paper. I don't actually have a physical routine that I adhere to. Nice.
Well, good luck with the rest of the quarantine. No doubt we'll catch up after that. But can I just there's not going to be too many people watching this live, but hope afterwards when people listen back, can you just give a little bit of an intro? Obviously, I know you loads and we've done stuff together, but just on like how you got into travel and I don't know, just a brief like history of Johnny.
Sure.
One step.
Yeah, my big break was doing the Sri Lanka challenge with large minority.
Nailed it. Thanks. The check is in the post.
Yeah, long story short, come from not a very privileged background in Ireland, single parent on welfare, blah, blah, blah. Always wanted to travel. Obviously, my mum couldn't afford to help me with my gap year or whatever, so I went to Thailand to teach English. spent 3 or 4 years teaching English in Korea and Thailand, broke, but kind of fun, romantic travel, broke when you're like in your early to mid 20s. And then went to Australia for a year. And during my year in Australia, I got a real job in an office in a suit and everything. Was genuinely depressed, nearly in tears every Sunday, knowing that work started on a Monday. And I started a blog during the office hours in Australia to keep me sane, to explain what I've been doing with my life for the last 4 or 5 years in Asia, doing like cool stuff instead of my boring new life in Australia. And then I thought, I'm going to make a go at trying to be a blogger. So I quit my job in Australia, I flew one way to Africa, and then spent the next 10 years from 2010 to 2020 trying to become the first person from Ireland to visit every country in the world. And then I finished that in 2017. And then since then, I'm trying to become the first person in the world to do the 7 summits, North Pole, South Pole, and every country. And that's kind of it.
Epic. Yeah. I mean, lots of stuff like in there that I wanted to ask you about in itself. So the traveling like to every country in the world, was that like, I've spoken to one of our mutual friends, Rick, who's actually got his own podcast about like
it's cool.
And speaking to people who have done that. Was that like a mission that you set off, or was it something that you kind of ran into and be like, oh, cool, well, this seems like a cool thing to try and do?
I think because the like if you're living at home, right, when you're under 20 or under, let's say, or 18 and under, I left when I was 18. The thought of visiting every country in the world, if you come from a poor background, you know, if you never went on holiday, if your family didn't have money to go on holiday and all that kind of stuff, like my situation, I think I'd be lying, even though it would be a nice story for a book that I said I dreamt of visiting every country in the world, but it just is so far out of reach of your upbringing. You know what I mean? I'd only been on a flight a handful of times in my life before I was 20, maybe 3 or 4 flights, maybe less. I can't even really remember going on a flight. Once to Netherlands, I think I went on the flight in the first 20 years of my life. So yeah, it was out of my scope. And then once I was in Australia and I'd already been traveling around, living in Korea and Thailand teaching English, and then I quit my job in Australia, I had saved like, I think 20,000 Australian dollars, which is about 15,000 US, 10,000 pounds. And I knew that was enough to visit loads of countries because I travel really cheap. And I don't buy anything. I'm not a flash guy. Like my buddy Josh, a mutual friend of ours, gave me this T-shirt in like, no kidding, 2014 or something. I've still got it. And it's his.
The same. Yeah, got old shoes and old. Yeah.
So I don't spend money on that stuff. So I knew that 10,000 pounds I had, I could travel. I was hoping even up to 2 years with it. So then I had a goal anyway, to cut another long story short, to visit 100 countries by the time I was 30. And I thought I could visualize that and could just about hope to afford that if I'm sleeping in bus stations and sleeping rough and all that on the road, which it did. And yeah, so then I could get my head around 100. And once I got to 100, I was thinking, wow, that's halfway. Maybe I could have. My blog had started to take off and started to make money and stuff. I thought, actually, I could do the whole shebang. So I did.
And then was there any kind of method to that madness then? When you planned to do the 100, did you kind of scope out, well, I'll do Africa, or I'll do South America, or I'll do like a loop one way round or the other?
Yeah. So for me, it was like, roughly speaking, I finished university in 2006 and I moved to Thailand in 2007. And then I finished every country in 2017. So it was a 10-year period from 07 to 17. And for me, that was a 2-stage process. The first 5 years of that, I was like romantic, vagabonding, like old school backpacking, pre-blogs, pre-YouTube, pre-Instagram. Yeah. Broke and just loving it, and really free. And all those 5 years were pretty much spent in Asia and Africa, South and East Africa. Yeah. Because I was broke and I could do long overland travels. So that brought me to, and then I did another overland travel just as I started to make money from my blog all through Europe. And that brought me up to nearly 100. And once I got to that 100 point, like I said, my blog was taking off. So suddenly I was in a situation I've spoken to you previously in the past. I started making quite a lot of money quite quickly on my blog, and I'm not used to that at all. And suddenly I had all this freedom, both time freedom because I don't have a job, but financial freedom that I could just literally fly anywhere in the world today. I could just go to Brazil tonight or whatever. So the second 5 years of my 10-year every country thing was a completely different prospect, because I could completely afford it freely and I could go wherever I wanted. But I still prefer to travel overland. So I would just basically each year I'd be like, I'm going to stay in this region for a year and then finish it, and then move to the next region for a year and finish it. But I didn't have that financial pressure that I had in my first 5 years, because I knew if I was homesick, I could fly my missus or my mum out to see me, or I could fly home or whatever. So it was kind of a 5-year broke period and a 5-year not so broke period. It was very different.
Yeah, I bet. And I mean, people think, well, the impression I get nowadays a lot with people on that quest, and having spoken to people who are like on that quest or during that mission, is people looking from the outside can often think it's quite easy, quite a simple thing, a lot of flights, but like knowing and having spoken to people who've done it, like it's an absolute nightmare, isn't it? I mean, like, it's a real challenge to cross some of these countries. And you know, obviously there's probably, I don't even know the number, you'll know better than me, but like 80, 90 that you could say quite easy, even less maybe. But then there's a bunch that are really like nigh on impossible to get in, right?
Yeah, and it is expensive. And people, you know, it's funny though, because I've been in the travel community quite deeply in it, into the hardcore travel stuff because of every country, and the blog stuff as well. So I'm in that community as well. And the thing that happened, like when people hear that you visit every country in the world, they think of this like long Instagram holiday where all these hot girls in bikinis, and it's not like that at all. It's really, really difficult. And people think that, like, if you were to just say to someone who loves travel, listen, I'll pay for all your travels over the next 8 to 10 years to visit every country in the world. You got to do it full time. Everyone instantly would be like, definitely, I'll do that. Yeah. And then after about a year or two in, you'll see like it's a massive struggle. It's like an ultra marathon. Mentally, it kills you. Physically, it kills you. You're in loads of dangerous places, fighting with bureaucracy, getting arrested and all this. It's actually a really tough thing to do. Although, having said that, there is a big community now who are actually quite wealthy, who do just fly in and out with people organising flights and visas on their behalf, third parties. So I guess there is that side to it as well. But I didn't do that, so I can't speak for that. Yeah,
I didn't really want to kind of nail you down to specifics, but what was there like? What were the? Are there any kind of standout memories of like that journey, like when you were on that kind of quest to visit every country, that really were like, I don't know, just stand out, that will stay with you forever to the grave, like memories of nightmare scenarios?
Well, many, obviously, but the biggest one for me, like I've got some wild stories which I've told you about over beers before, but like the huge moment for me was, I use a number of 197 countries, which is the United Nations, a handful of others. Anyway, and I was on 195, and I was stuck and I couldn't get into Yemen during the war, which is still ongoing actually. And I tried and failed 6 times over the course of a year. We ended up chartering our own plane and everything, got turned around in the air, mid-air, like just couldn't get into the country. And I ended up hitchhiking on this cargo ship from Oman through the Somali waters to Socotra, the Yemeni island. And I was just stuck in this boat for days and days. I didn't know when I was arriving. And it was just all these Indian sailors. No one spoke English, covered in cockroaches. I had no visa for Yemen when I arrived into the country and all this. And when I finally reached the shore after days on that boat, that for me was a huge moment, because of obviously the relief of not getting kidnapped by Somali pirates and all that stuff too. But then that for me was me kind of finishing my countries. I'd saved Norway for my last country to have a big celebration, get drunk with all my friends and all. But Yemen was like kind of the last country, because Norway was a formality, and that was just a huge moment for me. And then that's why I run trips back to that place, because it holds so much importance in my life, that place, Socotra Island.
Yeah, I've never been to Socotra. I mean, I was lucky enough to visit, because I was working in the Middle East at the time, to visit Yemen before the war started. So like it was at that point there was still direct flights from like Dubai to Sana'a. Double daily flights. So I was lucky enough to visit a few years before the war. And Yemen, to me, even to this day, just stands up, is one of the most amazing countries I've been to, actually.
Yeah, the mainland is opening up a bit now. The war's still dragging on, but it's kind of more secure in the mainland. It is starting to open up. I see dribs and drabs of hardcore tourists making it to Sana'a at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that conflict just seems like a never-ending disaster.
And
really.
It's not even their conflict, but let's not get into that.
I know. Let's not get it. I mean, yeah. And then you're, just to kind of jump around a little bit, but you're now going to do the 7 summits, right? I mean, I think you've done like 6 of them or something, but
I've done 4 and I've got 2 booked. And I've got 2 booked.
And the poles are on that list as well, I believe, aren't they?
Yeah, but I've been to the North Pole. I did that marathon at the North Pole, so it's just the South Pole that I've got to
do. How are you planning to get to the South Pole? This is quite a controversial one.
Well, it's kind of funny, actually. You know, I had a call about it today. I know a rich guy from Norway, and he's Iranian Norwegian, and he might do it with me. Because basically, the 7th summit that I'll do is quite an easy summit, just bloody expensive, is Vinson in Antarctica. Mount Vinson. So when I go to South Pole, because that's also expensive, I'll combine them both together. I want to do an expedition skiing from the cusp of Antarctica to South America, to the South Pole, but it depends on budgets. At the moment, like I sometimes because of the blog, sometimes I work with the brands that run the trip, so they give me a bit of a discount, but they don't give me it free by any stretch, because they cost tens of thousands. So they give me a bit of a discount. So, but it still costs me like tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars. So the South Pole in Vinson is like $70,000.
Really? Yeah, so that's even, I mean, I saw you and I wanted to pick your brains, well, not pick your brains, but just kind of understand a bit more of what an Everest planning expedition looks like, because I saw you recently kind of announced it that you're heading to Everest. Is that in 2023?
Yeah, because I was supposed to do Denali, which is North America's mountain, last month, but it was delayed.
Yeah.
And the company, who I won't name, took my money and wouldn't give me a refund. So I have to go with them next year so I don't lose my money. And that's also like bloody $10,000. So I have to go with them. Okay,
but at least they're going to honor you delivering the trip, though.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to fight about people with companies online. So I'm using them next year so I don't lose my money, which has pushed my Everest back another year as well.
Yeah. And so how far are you along with the Everest trip then? I mean, I saw you announce it, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Like, what does that planning look like? And you say expensive, like I think, because I've been involved in at some level of planning, I know roughly the cost, but it's because you're looking at like 20-30 grand for Everest, is it?
More. It starts at about 50 US, unless you're going solo.
And how far down the journey are you of that one? You're already set in stone now, are you?
Yeah,
are you like 2023 March season or something like that?
Yeah, booked, got dates booked, completely got all my gear, ready to go.
Ready to go.
I remember your bank loan on the debt pile.
I remember your like North Pole marathon planning. Was it North Pole where you were like, yeah, I think I've just booked a marathon next week. I've done no training, but should be fine. And then
I'm a little bit more organized now. Although I'm sure we're going to talk about the row. I wasn't actually very organized for that. For Everest, I'm going to be organized. It's life or death. I'm going to be organized for Everest. I've never booked a trip in advance before like this, so I'm actually on this. And also because it's so expensive, it's like lifetime money that actually I should spend on my house or whatever. I can't risk failing it because I can't afford to do it again. So I really have to be ready, like in the best shape of my life and blah, blah, blah.
And so the training for Everest then, would just be about starting now? I know you've done like some peaks already and that obviously helps with experience, mountain experience and stuff, but actually like core Everest training and stuff, is that like an 18-month journey or is that 12-month journey?
It depends how fit you are. Because I've been doing a lot of ultra marathons and like cross country cycles and obviously rowing the Atlantic and all that. So I've been training a lot over the last few years anyway. So I think 3 months would probably be enough. I'm going to do 6 months, but I want to be like really and crazy. I want to be the first couple of people up on the summit day. So if there are those horrific queues that you might have seen go viral recently, I want to make sure I want to be at the front of that queue. I want to be the fittest, strongest, there'll be better mountaineers than me and people fitter than me, of course, but I want to be in that first group so I don't have to be risking my life getting held back and all that. So I'm gonna do like a 12-month beast mode, like try to cut out the booze and sugar and go really crazy and be really ready for it. That's my plan.
Yeah. Also, I mean, out of all of the, like, the ones that come to mind the top of my mind, just assuming the most like physical challenges that you've done, I would have put like Marathon des Sables in there. I don't know, and I'm going to ask you, but like, what would you say is the most physically, not mentally, because that might cross over, but physically demanding that you've done?
Mentally was the row. We can talk about that.
I think I'm going to get to that, because I was literally, I mean, we'll get to the road, because I obviously followed that journey closely, because I was just, we were going to actually do this chat before, remember?
Yeah.
And then because you got delayed. So yeah, I was following that closely, but like physically, which would you say?
Physically, definitely not the row. That was all right, but just before the row, the reason I thought I'd be okay physically for the row actually was because I'd just done a 200-kilometer ultra marathon, but we did a straight shot, because Marathon des Sables is just less than 300 kilometers, right, in the Sahara. But every night you sleep rough in those kind of tent things. So you get a bit of a chance to recharge, and you do roughly a marathon a day. Apart from one day you do 2 marathons. That's pretty tough that day. Whereas the ultra marathon I did in Thailand just before the row, we did 200 kilometers straight shot, almost like 130 miles or something over 2 days. And that was brutal. That was absolutely brutal. My mate ended up in hospital, actually. It was so hard. So physically, that was the most pain.
Yeah, and the weather for that one didn't look like it was on your side. I mean, it was just general Thai weather, Thai summer, right? It was just like 35 degrees, and
because it wasn't an official marathon. I was stuck in COVID, and I just got one of my mates into running to get him to lose weight during COVID, because he used to be a big boozer. And
so you dragged him for a 235.
Yeah, it's so funny. And so it wasn't an official event, and I just planned it on Google Maps. I'd never been on the road or anything before. And then I just put a load of pins on Google Maps and just went like, okay, we'll go this way. And when we were doing it, after like 150 kilometers, it was the second night, because it went over 2 nights to get there, 40 hours. It took, or 50 hours. On the second night, we had no supply vehicles or anything, because I hadn't organized anything. We just flew up there and went. And the second night, at like we reached the edge of this national park at like midnight, and the next 30K or whatever, like 2/3 of a marathon, there was just no street lights in the middle of this national park, no 7-Elevens, no access to water or anything.
I was watching, it does, I mean, it's not very nice, because I kind of like watch as you're leaving, like in great spirits, and then thinking everything's going great, and then I see pictures of you, and I could just imagine, because when you're in these remote areas, relatively remote, like there's just no one there. Everyone's asleep. Nobody gives a shit about you. And you're just there, and they're like, why are these people like doing this?
It was funny. And my mate was such a trooper, as Gareth. He's Irish as well, and he'd never even run 10K before. And then we started training on St. Patrick's Day last year, and that was like, we're giving up the booze hardcore, and he was going to lose loads of weight, and he did it. Absolute hero. He was running every day. The weight fell off and started running 10, 20Ks with me every day. And the view was for us to do a marathon in November. And the marathon was cancelled because of COVID. And I was like, let's do this instead. Let's run from Chiang Mai to Chiang Rai in the north of Thailand. And he's just like, oh, God, okay, then. And he did it. And he did it, the hero.
Wow. So I've been quite heavily involved, in from the operational side of things, of these well-organized ultra marathons here in the UK. There's a charity, there's a big charity model built around that, where people mainly, obviously there's a big contingent of runners, but it's mainly walkers. But even walking 100 miles is really, really challenging. And the amount of broken people you see after, even the 50-mile route is incredible. And the mental side of it is just, you see people who just push through.
Crying.
Yeah.
It's funny how actually we ended up doing that, because I had the idea for it. I did that cycle from the Malaysian border to the Laos border, the length of Thailand, right? like a couple of months previously during COVID because I couldn't do anything. So I was stuck within Thai borders, and I cycled from the top to the bottom. It was 2,000 kilometers. And then I went from the south to the north, actually. And when I got to the north, I went to Chiang Mai and got a villa, and my mates flew up and we all got drunk in the villa to celebrate. And then we were hungover one morning watching YouTube, and I saw some guy run a 100-kilometer race for himself just. And he was saying, like, everyone should run a 100-kilometer race. Like, it's good for your soul, good to know yourself. And I was like, yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah. It seems really, really tough. I can't say it's on my list, but
you don't know yourself until you push yourself. Honestly, I know it's all that like American self-help cliche, but you really, when you need to get into those dark moments to know, like, where's your quit, where's your level. And it's so nice because actually it's always far further than you think. You can always just keep driving through it. And then David Goggins, I don't know if you listen to David Goggins.
Yeah, I do.
He's got this concept of the cookie jar, and I'm addicted to it. And it basically means, like, every time, can we swear or not? No?
Yeah, of course you can.
Anytime, like, you're really suffering, you've got to eat shit in the moment. He doesn't use that term. That's my term. And when you go through those shitty times, but you don't quit and then you finish them, right? That's really a tough experience, of course. But the next time you go through something shitty, you can go back to that cookie jar, and the memory of that is each time a cookie is a memory. And you'd be like, no, I do remember when that was really hard, that other shitty time. And you take that cookie out and you can eat it, and it gives you the power to finish whatever you're currently on. It's just the first time's hard because you don't have any cookies. But once you start accumulating the cookies, you know that you can just keep pushing it because you've done it before. And people just got to break through that first barrier, and then you're flying.
It feels like this is the perfect time to talk on, like, the road, because I kind of watched, I would imagine, and using that analogy, probably you reaching into that freaking cookie jar many, many times. What was like, yeah, I mean, to start, you obviously, so you rode the Atlantic. I followed your journey, like, all the way through. You started from, I think it's, well, you say, but it's Canary Islands to, is it
Antigua?
Caribbean, Antigua, yeah.
Yeah.
What was that like? Like, firstly, what you did it with? Yeah, tell me a little bit about, like, that story, like how that started. Because again, to me, it seemed you did it quite last minute as well. It was like, I might do this next, I'm doing it, and then next minute I'm on a boat in Canary Islands.
Yeah, that's basically what happened. During that Marathon des Sables, actually, I met a guy who really reminds me of you. He's a former Marine. That's a compliment for you there, Jane.
Yeah.
He does actually really remind me of you. Anyway, and I ran a whole marathon with him one of the days. Him and I stuck together, and he rode the Atlantic a few years previously, and I heard him talking about it during our day that we ran together. And it just sounded like a really epic thing to do with your life, you know, making memories to tell your grandkids and be someone that you can be proud of, be someone that your loved ones can be proud of. Like, just a cool achievement. So then I joined this Facebook group that was full of people who had done it, and more people have done. About 500 people have done it. It's not that rare. I mean, it's rare, sure, in the grand scheme, but there are people who do it every year, maybe 50 to 100 every year. And in November last year, like 6 months ago, that Facebook group that I was on, I just saw a photograph randomly one day saying we need 2 people to row the Atlantic in our team of 4 applications to this email, and I applied. Then I discovered you have to pay 20 grand. I don't know if I mentioned that online. You have to pay $20,000 to fund it.
Yeah.
And they didn't mention that in the application process.
Wow. Yeah. 20
anyway,
grand.
I applied. I found out about the 20 grand. Then really had a second to, like, because I'm building a house in Thailand and I work in travel, so the industry's wrecked and so much money, and it was really irresponsible. Anyway, I decided to do it regardless, and thankfully a sponsor came in last minute and halved that price, which was really helpful. And then within 6 weeks, I was in bloody south of England doing a sea survival course.
Yeah.
And like, I know people laugh at it, but I can't really swim, and I've never been on a boat, and I've never rowed or anything like that. So it was all quite scary, but because there was so little time to think about it, it didn't seem that bad, actually. I didn't really contemplate it. So, and I'd just run that ultra marathon, that 200 kilometers. So I was
fit. One, yeah.
Yeah. So I was fit. And then it got delayed with COVID and Brexit, and that's a whole other story. But anyway, we ended up leaving not until early March. We got stuck for like 4 to 6 weeks or something in the Canary Islands. And then we started from Lanzarote. After a day, our boat started to break down, and we had to get rescued by the Spanish Coast Guard. And they crashed into us and smashed our boat up even worse.
Yeah, I saw that too.
And then we got towed. We got towed to Fuerteventura. That was awful. It took like 7 hours.
And that was only like something like maybe 1 or 2 days. Not even, was it like the first day or something?
1 day, 24 hours, and it was just that was the worst 24 hours of my life, without a doubt. Rowing that night, and the waves were like this, like the boat's all over the place. I was soaking wet because I didn't know where all my gear was. So I didn't have my coat on. I was getting smashed by big waves. It was freezing cold. And then every time my shift finished. So the way when you row the Atlantic, for anyone who's listening, you do 2 hours rowing, 2 hours resting, 24 hours a day, all day, every day for about 2 months. And during your 2 hours off, you're in this tiny little cabin where you can't even sit up. You can't stand, of course. You can't even sit. You're like crouched over. And you should try to keep that dry. But we didn't have a clue what we were doing. We hadn't done any sea trials. We hadn't done any man overboard trials.
Yeah, really so this is what I was going to ask you, because so your first, you said you did the South of England like sea survival course, but I didn't really see you do any, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't see you do any like rowing like training or any of that preparation. Is that right?
Yeah, nothing.
Nothing.
I joined a gym in those 6 weeks from when I signed up to when I went to the sea survival course. I joined a different gym in Bangkok. I was in Thailand at the time that had a row machine, and I just used that every day. And then once I got on the boat, finally started rowing, I just realized that was completely worthless. It was like not appropriate training at all.
So the first time you actually saw the boat then was on land in the Canary Islands. Was that the first time you saw the boat? And then as far as I could gather, I mean, I haven't really like looked at the technicals, but it what is it like? Is it 20 foot, 30 foot, maybe less, 18?
Yeah, like the length of a hotel room. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how many feet. I'm not. You see, people who know boats can just instantly think of it. I have no idea about boats. It was like, yeah, the length of your living room.
Yeah, I can imagine it being something like 18 foot. But then also talk like your cabin. Obviously, I've seen your pictures and following stuff, but the cabin size looked ridiculously small.
Yeah, it was small. It's small for one person, and 4 people have to live in it for 2 months. This, honestly, Julian, this is the way I was trying to describe it when I was really depressed on the road, because I really struggled mentally on it. It's like 4 grown men, and we were all over 6 foot, all like 6'1", 6'1", 6 foot, and 6'2". And it's like 4 grown men having to live under a large dining room table for 2 months. You have to live under your dining room table. So like imagine sitting under your dining room table, and you can't like sit up properly or anything, like your head's like, oh, that's what it's like.
So I had this debate with, so my wife, Rachel, she was like, oh, I really want to row the Atlantic. And we were having this debate like while you were doing it, because it was, I was having this debate because you said already you did 2 hours on, 2 hours off. And I was like, and there must be obviously a method. This must be the best way. I assume that that's the tried and tested best way. I was wondering why you wouldn't do, because it seemed like you struggled with sleep deprivation quite a lot of the time, right?
Yeah, I was hallucinating every night. One night, I couldn't sleep because I was so depressed. I don't use that word lightly, honestly, Julian. I don't talk about ever being depressed. I honestly think I was like legit clinically depressed on that.
I can honestly say, having read like a lot of your posts, it really did come across that way on some of them. You almost feel like you could genuinely feel the pain like halfway through when you started saying like, I've had some of the worst days of my life. You could feel it. You really could.
It was honestly, it was the worst 2 months of my life, and it was the worst experience in my life. And I would come, unless you're doing something that's like a real dream. If you come from a boating background, or you've got some family history crossing Atlantics or something, so it's in you that you feel like you have to go and cross this ocean human powered, right? I understand some people have these things, like the way I feel I've got to do the 7 summit in every country thing, right? And that's in me. It's going to bankrupt me probably, risk of death, but it's in me, right? So I feel like I have to do it. So I understand some people might want to do that with the ocean. But if you're anyone that's listening, and I'm going to talk about this for the rest of my life, anyone who's just thinking about doing something cool with their life, don't fucking row across the ocean. Shit. Go and climb a mountain, go and run a marathon, go to Colombia and study Spanish. And it costs a fortune on top of all that. You know, like that's what the other side that you don't say. It costs a fortune. And there's so many better ways to spend your time and money than crossing an ocean. So unless there's a specific reason to do it, don't do it. It's just misery. That's how I feel about it.
So funny. Yeah. It came across like that. I mean, it really did. Like the sleep deprivation just to me seemed like just insane. I mean, to do that, and then correct me if I'm wrong again, like it's like you did the 2-hour row, and then you had to then like prepare like your food to obviously get the sustenance and energy you needed for the next 2 hours and the past 2 hours, and then you had to find time to sleep within that period, and then before you knew it, I assume you were back on shift again.
Yeah, but I was more depressed in the cabin than I was on the oars. Because when you're rowing, you can get in the zone of working out, exercising, you're outside. Still scary with big waves and stuff, but that's still shit, but not as shit as being in the cabin. Being in the cabin when I was getting into those really dark places, like catching myself just crying. Like I've never experienced that before. Like just miserable. And the thing I talk about, like doing ultramarathons or climbing mountains, or like risking your life going to Yemen and these like hitchhiking on cargo ships and all that, right? There's scary moments in these kind of things, and there's painful moments when you do the endurance races, but there's joy in them too. And you flip between pain and joy, and pride and pain, and satisfaction and pain, or fear or whatever. But there's always a flip side to that emotion that you know it's worthwhile, and you focus on why you're doing it. With that row, even when I finished, I was like, why did I put myself through that? That was just awful. And on top of that, and this is something that the ocean rowing community keep a big secret about, that I'm going to try to promote, and they'll all hate me for it. It's not actually that big a physical achievement, Julian. The ocean and the waves and the swell and the current and the wind does probably 80% of the work for you.
Yeah, I was speaking to, I actually was talking about you on this podcast I did with just 2 of our past participants, Mia and Scott, who actually have been sailing around the world for the last 3 years. And I was talking about you on that. And actually, because I'd said, obviously, that we'd had a chat and I was going to speak to you about the row. And they'd obviously said that they've done the Atlantic bit, and they said, yeah, you could basically do it in a bathtub. I mean,
someone's done it in a floating thing.
Yeah, and like just the seasonal currents and the winds that just take you across.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I wanted to do it, or the main reason I wanted to, like, because I've been doing it like more and more hardcore things, right? And I thought like this was going to be a really hardcore thing, and I thought I would join this group of like this alumni of legends, right? Of like beasts, and I wanted to be part of that group. For example, Everest, which has got this weird reputation now that it's some rich person's plaything, which is absolute bollocks. It is expensive, yeah. So you have to make a lot of financial sacrifices to do it. But anyone who summits Everest is basically a beast. They had to dig really deep. I know armchair people eating their Cheetos, getting fat, like to criticize it because of that viral photograph. But anyone who summits Everest is actually a beast. They've really risked their life. And I thought that rowing the Atlantic would be like that. And people who row the Atlantic try to perpetuate that story, but it's a complete myth. And worse than that was there's a book written by this guy called Steve Callahan called Adrift. That, because I'm a weirdo, I listened to while I was rowing during the night shifts, about a guy whose boat sank outside the Canaries and he ended up in a life raft drifting across the Atlantic. And he drifted across the Atlantic with no oars in, I don't know, 74 days or something. So then there's a girl recently who broke the world record that went quite viral, the youngest female to row the Atlantic. and there was an old boy who was 72 or something who broke the record for the oldest person to row the Atlantic, and both of them took like 60, 70 days. And the reality is, if you take any more than kind of 60 odd days, like, you haven't really rowed.
You've just gone with the wind and
you've just been in the boat. And then on top of that, to counterpoint that, is the real achievement is how much you suffer in that tiny cabin. So actually, there is still achievement there. You've gone through a miserable experience and survived it. So that's an achievement. But I think when people hear about you row in the Atlantic, they think like you're some beast legend who's smashed it across the ocean, and it's not like that at all. And I thought it was like that. And it wasn't until I was literally on it day one, I was like, whoa, this is completely not what I expected.
Yeah, and you've also been able to like draw upon all the other physical things, like really physical things that you've done. Having said that, it sounds as though you really will have this as a mental, like, to use your analogy again, as something really to go back to because of where it kind of took you.
Yeah, I really struggled so much, man. I just thought, like, it wasn't worth so much sacrifice financially and my time away from
I was thinking time for you as well. Like, it seemed like a big sacrifice of time.
Well, I'm still in it. It's June now. I'm in quarantine. This is me coming back to Thailand. I left in December. So I'll be into my 7th month tomorrow that I'm away. I just think there's a lot cooler things to do with your time. And the time and money that it costs. I don't know why. And I think actually deep down, the reason that it is popular is because people know that it's not that physically challenging, but it sounds like it is really physically challenging. And that appeals to people, because then they know they're going to bask in the limelight, even though it's not that physically difficult. The reality is, honestly, if you were to stand in a pub on a Saturday night, 90% of that people in the pub, you could pick them up and drop them in the Canary Islands, literally there and then, and they would be able to do it. Whereas when I signed up to it, I was like, oh, I'm not fit enough. I've got to train really hard. I've got to eat carefully. And it's not like that.
Yeah, I can see if this gets picked up by the international rowing community that does it, it's not going to go down too well. But hey, I like it. But, well, I suppose there must have been a few moments like in the middle of the Atlantic, like I don't know, to draw on like the positive stuff. Like, you must have had some, like, I love sailing and like being on the sea, but just the remoteness of being in the middle of the Atlantic must have been pretty cool on some level. Did you get any like good wildlife experiences, or was it pretty dull the whole way?
It was honestly a really negative experience for me personally, mate. I think if I had done it solo, it might have been better. I think that's another thing that I thought doing it in a 4 would be better, but I think but there's so little space. You're really cramped like this for 2 months. Yeah. Like when you sleep, there's a guy literally like right beside you, like on a kid's bed size, right beside you. So you never get any space to decompress. And I feel like at the end of the days, I love to close my door, turn on my aircon, and like think about life and mistakes that I've made and goals that I have, and to try to decompress what's happened that day or that week or whatever. And you don't have 1 second to do that. Someone's physically touching you at every moment because it's so small. So again, these are the preconceptions that I have, was that you'd be like, it's quite a beast mode thing to do, and it's not. And also that to do it solo would be really hard, or to do it in a 2 would be really hard, but to do it in a 4 would be easier, and to do it in an 8 would be even easier still. But it's not. To do it solo would be the easiest.
It sounds as though that would be the case, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's scary because you're out in the middle of the ocean on your own. That would be scary too. But the actual whole experience would be a lot better, I think, because you just have no respite from any of it when you're in a 4, and the space is so small. And the guys were great guys as well. Like, I had no friction with them. We had a great time. Like, I've been speaking to all 3 of them today. Like, we speak all the time. There was no friction there. That's not the reason why I had such a negative experience. I just don't.
And even along the way, did you guys manage to get on all like personally throughout, or was?
Yeah,
I mean, I've seen them
really well.
Did
really well. They were lovely guys. So that wasn't it at all. It's so claustrophobic. And I feel like I honestly feel like I know I hate to be negative about this because I'm quite a positive person, but after years of doing cool, difficult stuff that I'm always telling the world that it's cool, difficult but cool, I feel like I owe it to myself to be honest about this experience because no one else seems to be honest about rowing the ocean. Apart from Ben Fogle talks about it the same way I talk about it. He talks about it like it was the worst experience of his life and he hated it and da-da-da. He also talks like that too. He's the only other person. Everyone else wants to do the same fake basking of like how tough it was. Physically, I'm a beast and the experience was this and that. And it's not like that. It's just miserable.
Yeah. I mean, not to take you back to all these horrible memories, but like the day of
I'm free now, don't worry.
Well, like, so the day in the life, obviously, like the 2 hours on, 2 hours off, but like in between that, so that's just how long did you do it? 6 weeks, right? Or longer?
We were into our 8th week by the end.
8th week. So that's what you do non-stop. 2 hours on, 2 hours off, end of story.
Yeah, and like in the area they make your food like a really bad burn. You have to boil the water.
Yeah, so you're eating like the space food,
space food. I spilled it all over my thigh. It was all blistered and everything because like the boat's like this. But the food's actually all right. That space food. Obviously, I've been doing a lot of endurance stuff and mountain stuff, so I've been living off that space food loads over the last 3 or 4 years. So I don't mind that.
Yeah, all
the like superfluous stuff about it is pretty good. You've got a bit of internet connection. That's fine. The weather's not that bad. The food's all right. All that stuff's okay. It's just the lack of space and the relentless nature of it, and no escape to yourself to have any mental space at all. The one good thing about it, I would say, is it gives you it's the only experience I can think that anything I've done, like ultra endurance stuff, that gives you loads of chance, whether you like it or not, to self-reflect on everything about who you are and the life you've lived and the decisions that you make, and looking forward to the future and how everything's gonna transpire in your life, because you've got nothing but time to think about that stuff. And that is a rare privilege, to be honest, because life comes at you so fast in the real world that even though you think you're gonna sit down and you read self-help books and you watch self-help documentaries and you're like, I'm going to focus, what do I have to do? Write my goals for today down in a notepad or whatever, all these kind of things that you should still do. But then life comes at you, your missus is arguing with you, your mum's sick, whatever, and you're back to the real world, 100 miles an hour again, and you've forgotten all that stuff that you know you should do. But on this, you really have a time to reflect deeply and then re-reflect and re-reflect. You know what I mean? So you really get to know yourself, and that's quite a difficult experience and quite a difficult journey, but yeah, to be honest, despite all my negativity, that is a real benefit and a rare opportunity. I can't think of anything else you could do that in, because when you do Everest or whatever, you're so knackered with the lack of oxygen. It's like running a marathon constantly, you're like deep breathing, so you're just thinking about take a step, you're in the moment. But the row's quite physically easy. So you don't have to think about rowing. You don't have to think about clenching your muscles or anything. It's just quite a lackadaisical walking type motion. So you can think clearly and coherently and with a lot of lucidity. So then you can just think about your life so much, and it's quite difficult actually. Kind of.
I was going to say, was that maybe some of the reasoning behind, you used the word depression earlier on, because you had that, I guess there was an element of regret that you'd left people behind, that you weren't doing stuff that you should have been doing. You've misallocated that huge amount of time that you're used to kind of nonstop, like next trip or next thing.
Yeah.
I guess that really could be a possible source for that depression.
Yeah. And also, mate, do you know what else it taught me as well? Like it makes you very self-critical, which is both good and bad. But all this stuff about how you should get out of your comfort zone, and you should, if you want to really grow as a human and try to succeed in whatever you call success, you need to push yourself. And I felt like I had been doing that in the last 10 years. I really feel proud of what I've achieved and everything, and building my life. But what I do now admit is that although, of course, it's still difficult for me to do some ultra endurance stuff, and it's still painful, and I'm in hospital with injuries and blah, 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 that is in a way my new comfort zone, even though it's miserably uncomfortable. That is my comfort zone, or let's say I'm just on the cusp of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Whereas doing something like these silent retreats that people go on in Burma and Thailand and stuff. Obviously, I'm based in Thailand, so I know a lot of people who do that, where you don't talk to anyone for 7 days, you don't make eye contact, and they go through that same deep self-reflection where you end up in tears and you think about the mistakes you made and you try to rebuild your planning systems. And I've clearly avoided that all my life, even though I've had loads of opportunities to do those silent retreats, because I'm quite an anxious person. Like I feel like very anxiety ridden when I'm lying in bed and stuff. So I've avoided those deep reflection stuff. And actually that made me a bit of a hypocrite, because I'm always telling people, get out of your comfort zone, get out of your comfort zone. But that's something that's so far out of my comfort zone that I would never contemplate doing. And then by accident, I fucking signed up for essentially a 2-month self-meditative retreat.
Yeah, in the complete opposite way of you thought of you know, how you thought you would do it in the first place. I'll never go to a silent retreat. But actually rowing the Atlantic is it's the same thing.
I thought it would be like, oh, the waves are hitting you and it's dark and your hands are bleeding with blisters. Fuck it, let's just dig deeper, boys. We can do it. I thought it was going to be like that, but it wasn't. It was like, do you remember like your mum's giving you so much and you snapped at her that time, and like, you shouldn't do that. You should be more patient when she's on Skype.
Why have I left my family for this amount of time? And
it's more like that.
Yeah. I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong again here, but like it didn't sound as though you were affected too badly physically, but a couple of your teammates were pretty bad hit. Maybe not like, was it muscular, or like just, it looked like just like blisters and just sea salt and sun.
I was partnered with the old boy Martin, who I'm really good friends with now. He's a lovely guy. But he was 62, and he had seen these old boys row as well, right? Who didn't really row; they just drifted across. And to be fair, and I had a big epiphany. It's a long story about the lessons that I learned from this. I was getting very frustrated in the first couple of weeks with my perception of Martin's effort, because I wanted to kill myself. I wanted to break a world record and all this, right? And that's my nature. And Martin just wasn't sweating or anything. And I'm trying to kill myself every day.
Yeah.
And we had a bit of friction there. And then I came to realize that like Martin's not on Johnny Ward's expedition. Do you know what I mean? And rightly, like, why the hell should he? If I want to kill myself, that's my prerogative. And then if he doesn't want to kill himself, that's his prerogative. And he was happy enough to take it easy. And then I learned that lesson action. I feel like I've careered through my life thinking like, let's do it like this, all or nothing, because that's how I live. And I kind of expect other people to live like that. And that's not but why should they live by the standards that I believe that we should live by? It's ridiculous. And that was a difficult lesson, but one that I learned. And Martin was very patient with me through that learning process. So that was very helpful. But anyway, the purpose of that was his body was wrecked. So he was barely rowing. He had no blisters and his body, like, he's 62 and he doesn't come from a gym background or a fitness background. So he didn't really dig that deep, essentially. And nor should he have to, because he'd seen these old boys drift across over the years too. And then Pritch, the guy from MTV, Dirty Sanchez, lovely, lovely, lovely guy, by the way. Such like a kind, gentle, lovely guy. He pulled a muscle in his back and couldn't row the last week or two. Like, just it's gone. Even though you're not killing yourself on the oars, it still pulls your shoulders and your lats. So he just literally didn't pick up an oar then for the last week or two, which was really tough for him.
Wow. And then I guess that moment that I mean, again, I kind of witnessed it as your energy kind of picked up, and it was actually mainly only when you saw land again. But that moment must have been like the most amazing euphoric thing that you had in a while, because of all the negative stuff that you've been saying. Like, just to then come for that to be coming to an end must have just been ecstasy.
But seeing land for the first time after 2 months, like, you haven't seen any colors. Remember, it's a weird concept, mate. You haven't seen any colors. It's just been blue for 2 months. So to see something green, you're like, wow, your brain is like trying to process it. That was the relief for me there, the euphoria, seeing it. And then it was like another 2 days or whatever it was to take you to get to land. Actually getting off it was still a huge relief, and happy for it to be over. But that first sight of it was kind of the release when you know it's over, really. You know what I mean? Like boats could come and save you now if you needed to.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're in the middle of the Atlantic, you're actually closer to the space station than you are to land.
Yeah.
But when you see the land, you know it's over. But it was relief, not happiness. Honestly, it was relief.
What was it like? Like, because obviously sea legs are a massive thing. Like, how long did it like? Because I guess your brain is like almost like a gyroscope. Like, for how long did it take for you to get back to normal balance, normal? Because you would have been floating for whatever 7-8 weeks.
Yeah.
To be normal, like to feel like you were back on land properly. Because I mean, I've done sailing trips. Probably the longest has been like 4 days on the sea, and it takes you another day to actually feel like you're stable again. I mean, I would imagine
getting off onto the jetty when we landed. Handed a glass of champagne, necked it, got handed another glass of champagne, just dropped, like it was like this, and just dropped it and smashed it on the deck. It was weird. Yeah. And then we were drunk for like 3 days. We just kept partying for like 3 days. I didn't really have a chance to feel like every morning when I would go out of bed, I was a bit hungover, but then I would stumble out of bed and it would be the sea legs, not the hangover. And I'd be like, whoa. And then over the course of the day, you'd kind of get your bearings. You'd feel a bit queasy or a bit off, not queasy, but a bit off. But you kind of with it. And then the next morning you go to sleep and your body goes back to the last 2 months. And then every time I would wake up, I'd be like, whoa, all over again. But it was honestly like a bit of a blurry, drunken / hungover time in Antigua. So I was always like, like a bit off it anyway.
So high level Johnny Ward synopsis of rowing the Atlantic. Don't fucking do it ever. Like it.
Unless you've got some compulsion, specific compulsion. Yeah, go climb a cool mountain like Kilimanjaro. Like if you're a beast, then go and climb Everest or whatever, or run across a country or something. But if you want to do something that's cool but it's not going to kill you, yeah, go and climb Kilimanjaro, or do sea to summit, cycle from like the coast of Tanzania across Tanzania and then climb Kilimanjaro. That would be such a cooler thing to do.
Yeah, or come to a tuk-tuk rally, right?
Yeah. That video, watching your intro video of the one in Cambodia, I was sitting here thinking, like, I hope when this is all over, we can get that going again. Now I'm traveling less. I'm like, I want to do that Cambodia tuk-tuk thing so much.
Well, I think one that might be actually up your street I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but we've just launched the Pakistan one where we're going up the Karakoram Highway from Islamabad.
We're doing a trip for that, for our charity.
Yeah, so we're basically doing that in a tuk-tuk now. Next June is the first one, and yeah, we've got a lot of interest, which is really cool. I'm super excited to new destination.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, really excited about that. I mean, this kind of led on. I always ask people that have done our trips, like, I know it was a while, and you probably got tons of tuk-tuk related stories, just being in Asia and stuff. But what were your memories of the Lanka challenge? I know you did the Sri Lanka one.
Yeah, we
had a great trip, obviously.
Yeah. But oh man, honestly, to this day, it was one of the best trips we ever did. Me and Josh and Jordan, the guys I did it with, talk about it all the time. It's so good, mate. It's just brilliant.
Thanks. Sorry.
No worries. Yeah, I just loved it. And it's just hard to describe how brilliant a trip it is. And I'm not a tour guy. I'm not like a tour guy. It's
one of the things that I always have to try and explain to people who are like, oh, I never do group tours. And I am one who like, it's my worst nightmare as well to do a group tour. Like it really is. So to kind of run something that is a similar concept, but having to explain to people, well, actually the group side is completely optional. Like it's more of like the community and the social side. If you want it, it's there for you to enjoy it. But if you don't want it, you don't have to get involved. And then of course the day is, you're left to your own devices. So
yeah, I'm a massive ambassador for large minority. I think your trips are absolute top quality, best in the market, honestly.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, I mean the Sri Lanka one that you did. I mean, so I like, people know me, like I bang on about tuk-tuks because I just have somehow fallen into this like default tuk-tuk obsession. I've got one here in London now, actually. So
wow, really?
yeah, it's literally parked outside.
Wow.
So yeah, the look, and like obviously a huge South Asian community in England, really. Like people just love it, and it kind of takes them back to, I guess, to where they're from. A lot of kids here have never even seen a tuk-tuk because they're not here. There's probably about, I don't know, 50 or 100 in the UK, like spread around.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just love it as a platform for adventure, going in and out, like stopping, and it's turned out to be good fun.
Yeah, it's so good. That's no way. No, like 50 years from now, countries won't allow it. So you've got to do it now before it gets banned.
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's going to be some sort. There is already like the electric revolution that's starting. Not revolution, but like the tuk-tuks will all kind of migrate to like this electric model sooner or later. Well, it's already started, but to go.
That'll be a long time before that hits Pakistan and Cambodia and stuff, though.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the first bit is just that they're starting to convert, like have the conversions between like taking out the old motors, sticking in batteries, and I think that will be so they won't have to get rid of their their kit.
Yeah, got you. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and what's you've got Everest obviously planned for 2023. But then anything else in the short term, like you're obviously what's happening in the next kind of 12 months?
Well, on a personal level, I'm building a house in Chiang Mai.
Yeah,
so I'll go up and check on that. But I'm actually doing I'm organizing a trip to Tanzania in November to raise money for Cure Parkinson's. My mum's got Parkinson's. You've probably seen it on Facebook. So we're going to do the Serengeti Marathon, a big group of people, 20 of us, and then go on safari and go to Zanzibar to celebrate after. So we're doing that in November. And then we're doing a school build with our charity in Thailand in January. We're building a kindergarten for the Burmese migrants on the Burmese border with a private group of Canadian company. And then
is that with Josh?
With Josh, yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I just spoke to him 2 seconds before. Actually, I did hang up on him to chat to you.
Oh, really? Yeah, I need to get him on this because when
I was talking to you, he said you'd mentioned it.
Yeah, he's probably gonna say, "Oh, you just wanted to get Johnny on first." I'm like, no, I really want to speak to him about. No, because of the really cool stuff. Well, mainly about like I know we could talk about it, like the charity stuff, the school building stuff, but I really want to kind of rack his brains about it and ask him some questions.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll start those trips up again. Well, we got private ones going anyway, thankfully, but hopefully we'll start the commercial ones where we can bring like my blog followers and stuff like we normally do and do some more projects. Because we've had to cancel. Well, let's not get into COVID, but obviously everything got put on hold for the last 12 months or 18 months now.
Well, so I started off when I like really reluctantly wanting to talk to people, like obviously because you can talk all day about COVID, but it's now turned. It is like I guess in my mind I was expecting it initially without having thought about it too much, like for it just to end, or there would be an end, But now the more and more it goes on, and just seeing how countries are like changing, like the vaccination programs, like how the extreme countries are doing these really ridiculous like quarantines, like that mix between tests. It is unfortunately just going to have to be a thing that we do have to talk about it non-stop, because it's going to be such a part of, and this next phase of like, having on a state level, on a country level, like regulating, vaccinations, who's allowed to enter countries. I mean, it terrifies me, but
well, this trip I'm doing in Tanzania in November, for any country with this crazy state quarantine like I'm currently in, Tanzania is on the red list. So I sent an email out to all the people who are coming. There's 26 people coming. The British and the Irish, loads of them are pulling out because they have to quarantine when they come back. Thankfully, loads of countries aren't so crazy about that stuff. So like Canadians and EU citizens, US, they're free to come and go. So it'll be either hardcore Brits and Irish, or mostly people not from countries with state quarantine.
Yeah, it does seem like the Brits will be one of the first, or not one of the first, but one of the countries that soften their stance on, like, if you've had probably just to promote the vaccine, but like if you've had vaccines, to reduce the requirement to quarantine when you come home, or come back to, or go back to England. You know what I mean? Go back to the UK.
Because of Rachel, you probably had your vaccinations ages already, have you?
Rachel's had hers. I haven't had mine, but Rachel's had hers. Both, and Australia's not like it's not a requirement to go in. So it's the quarantine and testing. So probably
I got mine in the NHS before I left. Very impressed.
Yeah, pretty big campaign they've done here.
Yeah.
Cool, Johnny. Well, like, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy quarantine schedule.
I'm gonna go and play PlayStation. No, I've got to go for a run, and then I'm gonna play PlayStation.
No, like, seriously, it's been great catching up. Thanks a lot for joining, and I hope to come and spend some time by your new pool in Thailand.
let me do some work and be able to afford it first. Yeah.
Yeah, and then hopefully do a trip and catch up soon.
Yeah, I hope so. Hopefully see you next year, mate.
Cool, Johnny. Great to see you, man. Cheers.